Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is always to take complex, overwhelming source material and really just extract the most important nuggets of knowledge so you can walk away well informed.
And today we are wading into a market that has gone, well, utterly chaotic.
Staggering. And frankly, as we'll get into, historically corrupt. We're talking about the consumer DRAM market.
Yeah, and it's not just, typical market volatility. This is a structural realignment. The data we've synthesized reveals that the fundamental nature of the memory market is changing, and possibly permanently.
And that means the average person, whether you're building a PC, buying a new phone, upgrading a laptop, you're going to be paying for this shift.
Across every single piece of technology you own.
That's our mission today. We're taking a deep dive into sources exposing the current economic dynamics of the RAM industry. We're going to focus on the alleged duopoly of manufacturers and how their priorities are fundamentally shifting the market away from you, the consumer. And for this, we're really excited to spotlight the excellent, truly eye-opening analysis from the team over at Nexus, presented by Steve Burke. He's done the heavy lifting of gathering the raw numbers and the economic context.
And we'll link his videos in the description. You should absolutely check them out.
Definitely.
But when we say staggering, I mean, we're talking about cataclysmic figures.
Yeah.
The data shows specific, widely purchased memory kits increasing by 169%.
169.
116%, even 181%. And this is in a span of just a couple of months.
That's not a normal market fluctuation.
Not at all. And if you're looking at high-capacity memory, say 128 gigs for a workstation, we're talking about increases of $400, even $500 in some cases.
Wow.
The analysis even noted observing one popular kit increase in price by nearly 1 percentage point per day.
Per day.
For almost 2 weeks straight. I mean, this isn't a supply crunch. It's a full-blown market cataclysm, and it's driven by deliberate choices.
Okay, so let's unpack this. You mentioned the triopoly. The sources refer to them as the mythological pantheon, which I think really captures that sense of remote, untouchable power they have.
It does. We're talking about Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron.
The big three.
The three core suppliers. They collectively control basically the entire global market for DRAM silicon. And, according to the analysis, they listen exclusively to corporate buyers, mega corporations.
Not us. Not the people trying to build or upgrade a PC at home.
Not at all. And that's the core issue. Historically, the DRAM industry has always been cyclical.
Right.
It follows a rough 4-year pricing cycle, traditional boom and bust.
Right. We've all seen it. Prices go up, they come down.
But the central theme we need to grasp right away is that the industry is now exiting that traditional cycle.
Yeah.
The demand from servers, which is being fueled by this unprecedented growth of AI and vast data centers, it's fundamentally altering the nature of the industry.
So this shortage boom, this isn't temporary.
The projection is that it will last for at least 4 years or more. It's going to keep prices elevated for much, much longer than any typical cyclical peak.
Okay, so this is a permanent structural change. It's redefining the cost of computing for all of us.
Yeah.
Let's get into the actual numbers. We need to quantify exactly what this price shock looks like.
Agreed. We can't just talk in percentages. We have to look at the kits people are actually trying to buy.
So where do we start? What's a good baseline?
We started with the current sweet spot for, a modern high-performance PC build, the 2x16 GB DDR5 6000 CL30 kits.
Right, that's the go-to for enthusiasts and gamers. Good speed, good latency.
Exactly. And we compared prices from mid-September right before the spikes really became obvious, to November.
And the numbers are, what did you say?
Brutal. Brutal is the word. Take G-Skill's Trident Z5 Neo RGB kit, a super popular, widely available kit.
I know that one.
This specific memory increased by $145. It went from $125 in mid-September, and it just soared to $270 by the end of October.
$145. For a lot of builders, that one price hike on one component. That's the difference between a mid-range system and something that pushes you into a high-end budget you didn't plan for.
It completely throws off your build budget. And let's just pause on those specs for a second. For anyone who might not live and breathe this stuff, we keep saying DDR5 6000 CL30.
Right. So the 6000 is the speed.
That's the effective data rate, yeah.
Right.
But the CL30, that's the CAS latency. It's basically the delay, measured in clock cycles, between when your CPU asks for data and when the memory actually responds.
So lower is better. Less delay.
Exactly. CL30 is considered very low latency. It means a faster response time, which is critical for gaming for system responsiveness.
Okay.
And the memory silicon that's capable of hitting that sweet spot, it requires higher quality wafers, tighter manufacturing controls, so that's why it costs more to produce, and now much, much more to buy.
When the speed of that increase is what's so alarming, isn't it? The data showed a 13% increase for that one G-Skill kit between October 28th and November 13th.
13% in about 2 weeks.
That's nearly 1% per day. That's not a natural market fluctuation. That's a panic.
It's completely unsustainable, and it created instant sticker shock for anyone shopping. And if you look at other comparable kits, the trend is exactly the same.
Like what?
Kingston's Fury Beast RAM, another staple, saw a 95% increase. It went from $137 to $267.
Doubled.
But the most shocking single example in the sources was the Team Group T-Force Expert kit. It more than doubled. It rocketed from $93 to $250.
93 to 250.
That is a 169% increase in a little over a month.
So broadly speaking, the analysis found that the average price increase across comparable, widely available 32 gig kits was around 100%.
100%. Prices doubled in 30 to 60 days.
That fundamentally alters the economic structure of building a new computer. Full stop.
It does. And that's just the mid-range. We also looked at faster DDR5 kits, those enthusiast 7200 speed kits, just to test a hypothesis.
What were you looking for?
We wanted to see if maybe the high-end consumer products were insulated somehow. The thinking was, well, enterprise servers usually stick to lower, more stable speeds, so maybe the really fast stuff for gamers is safe.
That was wishful thinking, I take it.
Completely. The data showed the prices followed the exact same pattern. The percentage increase was nearly identical for both the 6000 and the 7200 speeds.
Okay, wait. If servers aren't using the 7200 speeds, why would those kits see the exact same price spike? What does that tell us?
That's a great question. It gets to the supply chain mechanics. It suggests that the raw silicon cost, the wafer cost from the triopoly, is soaring so fast that the downstream stick makers—
G-Skill, Corsair.
Right. They're simply applying a blanket percentage increase to their finished product based on that raw material cost, regardless of what the end use is. No consumer option is safe, because the problem is at the very root of the supply chain.
The silicon itself.
The silicon itself.
Which brings us to DDR4. You might be listening and thinking, okay, I'm just building a budget system or, a home server for Plex or a home lab. I'll just stick with DDR4 and save some money.
Yeah, that would be the logical move in a normal market.
But the sources say DDR4 prices are actually unbelievably bad right now. Why?
Because they're getting hit by two compounding factors at the same time.
Okay, what are they?
First, they're expensive, just due to the general demand surge that's sweeping the whole market.
Yeah.
But the second, and arguably more brutal factor, is that the supply is actively being wound down.
End of life.
Exactly. DDR4 is going end of life, or EOL. The major manufacturers are producing substantially less of it as they shift all that capacity to DDR5 and, more importantly, to the higher margin AI memory.
So we looked at a slightly longer date range for DDR4 kits, right? June 1st to November 13th for the standard 2x16 GB DDR4 3200 CL16 kits.
We did, and the percentage increases were somehow even worse than DDR5.
How is that possible?
Because the supply is being so aggressively squeezed. The analysis noted that DDR4 saw greater percentage increases. For example, Corsair Vengeance LPX RAM.
A classic. Everyone's used that at some point.
It was $55 in June. By November, it hit $150.
55 to 150. That's a $95 increase on what was a budget component.
And look at G-Skill Ripjaws V. It rose by a staggering 180%. Kingston's Fury Beast, the DDR4 version, up 163%.
It's just a cruel twist. The analysis chalks this up to that lethal combination. Continued, steady demand for older platforms, budget builds, home labs.
Right. People still need it.
Coupled with that dwindling EOL supply. Manufacturers are happy to let that supply dry up while they just demand high prices for whatever is left on the shelves. It's a classic squeeze play.
It also tells you everything about the power dynamics. If a manufacturer sees zero incentive to keep making an older, lower-margin product, they'll just let the supply chains dry up. Any inventory that's left can then be sold off at these vastly inflated prices, simply because there is no alternative for anyone on that platform.
And this frantic pricing leads us right into the spot price market. Now, most of us aren't buying memory at spot prices, but this is like the day-to-day indicator of wholesale trends.
It's a crucial early warning system. It accounts for less than 10% of the overall market, but it's important.
And what does it show?
It shows you where the big players, the corporate buyers, are panic buying. And the data here reveals this significant, almost unbelievable disparity.
Between DDR4 and DDR5.
Yeah. DDR4's raw 16 gigabit spot price was around $24.55. Meanwhile, DDR5 solutions were hovering around $15.20.
Okay, stop. That's completely counterintuitive. The older technology is costing disproportionately more at the wholesale level than the newer generation. Why?
The analysis suggests a couple of reasons. One, the remaining DDR4 is likely very scarce and being used for specific contracted industrial purposes where they just have to buy it no matter the cost.
Price isn't the main concern for them.
Right. And two, it indicates the supply of raw DDR4 wafers is almost gone. Vendors are just running out.
Yeah.
The expectation, based on this, is that DDR4 might eventually cost consumers more than DDR5 in total.
An older technology costing more than the new one because of a pure, aggressive supply-demand squeeze.
That's the trajectory. And the speed of that squeeze is phenomenal. TrendForce data cited in the sources showed DDR4 spot prices increasing up to 22% week to week.
And in that same week, DDR5's wholesale price inflated by 30%.
30% in 7 days. That rapid inflation was attributed by the analysis firm to severe hoarding,
So the big corporate buyers see the prices climbing, they rush to stock up.
which sucks up all the available supply and just justifies the next round of price hikes. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of panic buying.
Okay, so we've set the stage. Prices doubled, nearly tripled in a matter of weeks and months. Now we pivot to the why. And the why is, it's unprecedented. This situation, while it's rooted in some historical volatility, is being driven by a new, powerful, and fundamentally structural force, AI.
Indeed. The core problem, as we noted, is that manufacturers are rational actors. They're prioritizing profit. They're diverting capacity towards these significantly higher margin products.
Like what specifically?
Specifically high bandwidth memory, or HBM, and sophisticated server memory. And in doing so, they're actively starving the desktop and consumer gaming supply. They're just capitalizing on this demand shift amidst what the sources aptly call the data center frenzy.
Let's break down the economics here. Why is server memory so much more profitable than the RAM stick you or I would buy?
It really boils down to reliability and complexity. When we
Right.
talk about server memory, we're usually discussing ECC RDUMs.
Okay, what do those letters mean?
The R stands for registered. It means there's an extra buffer chip on the module itself. This chip adds stability and allows the system to handle immense amounts of capacity. Think terabytes of RAM in one server rack.
Okay. And ECC?
Error-correcting code. This memory can detect and correct most common internal data corruption errors on the fly. In a data center, data integrity is everything, so this complexity and reliability commands a huge premium.
Whereas our consumer memory is simpler, cheaper to make.
Much cheaper. It's called UDIM, or unbuffered DIM. So when you can sell more complex product at a much higher price for a much higher profit, you do it. That's why Samsung recently raised RDM contract prices by as much as 50%.
50%.
When you can do that, why would you bother with the low-margin consumer stuff? You wouldn't. That's why consumer supply is being starved.
That makes perfect sense. Now, let's talk about HBM for a second, because that seems to be the biggest resource sink in this whole AI push.
It's the black hole for raw silicon right now.
Can you just explain it simply? Why is it so demanding?
HBM, high bandwidth memory. It basically solves the bottleneck problem for massive AI processing. It's a technology where memory modules are stacked vertically like a dense layer cake.
Okay.
And they're packed into a much smaller, denser area on something called an interposer, which places them extremely close to the GPU or the AI accelerator chip.
So it's all about speed and density for those intense AI calculations.
Precisely. But HBM is incredibly demanding on manufacturing capacity. The staggering statistics cited in the TrendForce analysis is that HBM consumes over 3 times the raw wafer capacity of standard DRAM.
Wait, say that again? 3 times?
Over 3 times. So for every single wafer a manufacturer diverts to making HBM, they are effectively removing 3 potential wafers of standard DDR5 DRAM from the consumer market supply.
That one statistic tells the whole story. The opportunity cost for making consumer RAM versus AI-focused HBM is it's astronomical.
It is. And we have specific concrete data points that illustrate the sheer scale of this diversion, particularly concerning one of the biggest names in AI, OpenAI.
Right, the Stargate project.
The sources highlighted OpenAI's partnership announcement with both Samsung and SK Hynix for its colossal Stargate project. And this partnership included an aggressive goal to target 900,000 wafer starts per month.
Okay, put that number in context for us. What does 900,000 wafer starts a month actually mean for global production?
Tom's Hardware reported that this enormous allocation, just for the Stargate project, represents around 40% of the total global DRAM output.
40%.
40%. Let's just pause on that. Nearly half of the world's production capacity is being effectively ring-fenced by one major AI player and its partners for a single long-term project.
So you're saying nearly half the world's output is earmarked for essentially one client and one purpose. That leaves everyone else, all other corporations, all other server farms, every single consumer market fighting over scraps.
It inherently squeezes every other segment of the market, especially the consumer sector, which is, again, the lowest margin.
And this massive demand gives the manufacturers not just pricing power, but what, rationing power?
Exactly. We know that major corporate buyers are reportedly receiving only about 70% of the server DRAM they ordered. They can't even fulfill their full orders right now.
Which just dries up competition among the biggest players.
And widens that supply-demand gap even further. It creates a feeding frenzy at the top that ripples all the way down, and it just punishes the consumer.
This is why we can't call this a normal cycle. This whole mechanism is what fundamentally breaks that historical boom and bust regularity we talked about.
It is. Digit Times Asia was quoted in the analysis, noting that the memory industry's historical 3.5 to 4.5 year cycle is now disrupted because this AI-driven cycle is, quote, abnormal. The shortage boom is expected to last for at least 4 years or more.
So we're entering a new paradigm where these elevated DRAM prices are the norm, not the exception.
Driven by a sustained industrial revolution, not a temporary tech craze.
And this is where we have to transition into the context needed to really appreciate the actions of this triopoly. Because while market volatility is one thing, the DRAM market, as noted in the sources, has a uniquely corrupt history.
Yeah, you have to acknowledge this history. It frames why so many observers are suspicious of these sudden, steep, coordinated price increases.
And the most damning evidence goes back to the mid-2000s, right?
In 2006, the U.S. Department of Justice successfully indicted multiple executives, 2 from Samsung, 1 from SK Hynix, for participating in a global conspiracy to fix DRAM prices.
And the evidence showed they were literally meeting and agreeing on pricing together.
Explicitly. I mean, that's the literal definition of a cartel, which is what observers called them at the time.
It's also important to note the standard manufacturer behavior, which is, while it's legal, it can look coordinated. Companies commonly reduce output to stabilize pricing.
And we saw this happen very recently. In late 2022 and early 2023, after that COVID-era overstocking, production was cut substantially across all 3 manufacturers.
That was a highly strategic move.
It led directly to prices improving in the manufacturer's favor by the end of 2023. It set the stage perfectly for this AI surge to maximize their profits. They didn't have any excess inventory dampening the market when AI demand exploded.
So they could just start raising prices immediately?
Instantly.
And we should also touch on the attempted new antitrust case from 2022, which was ultimately dismissed due to insufficient evidence. But the extreme volatility and that clear historical precedent for collusion, it makes any sudden price hike immediately suspicious.
It just creates a climate of distrust. Now, let's clarify the supply chain here, because most people are buying G.Skill or Corsair, not memory direct from Samsung.
Right.
The sources break it down into 2 parts. You have the 3 big suppliers, Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, who sell the raw silicon, the wafers. Then you have the downstream stick makers, like Corsair and Kingston, who buy that silicon, test it, configure it, and put the heat sinks on.
Okay, so if the raw silicon price doubles, how do those downstream guys benefit? Aren't they just paying more for their components?
That's the crucial distinction, the timeline. They can still benefit greatly from price changes if they're sitting on a large inventory of memory they bought at the last lower price point.
Okay.
So if the raw material price skyrockets from, say, $100 a wafer to $200, they can instantly double the price of their existing inventory that's already sitting on the shelf.
Which vastly increases their margin because they didn't have to pay the new higher raw material prices for that stock yet.
Exactly. That helps explain why those consumer kit prices shot up so fast. They're riding the wave created by the triopoly and realizing these massive inventory gains.
If they bought a wafer supply chip, assembled the sticks, and then the underlying cost doubles, They can double the price of their finished product on the shelf and just make massive profits.
It incentivizes them to increase prices instantly.
Yeah.
The speed of the spike is therefore a combination of the triopoly raising the raw silicon price and the stick makers maximizing profits on their already purchased cheaper inventory.
And on the subject of collusion, the sources make a cynical but probably accurate point. Modern price fixing may not even require private collusion anymore.
No, you don't need a smoke-filled room. They can achieve similar results by coordinating their intentions publicly in their earnings reports.
So they just signal their plans to each other.
Exactly. By talking about their plans to cut production or prioritize high-margin sectors like HBM, they're basically telling their competitors what they're going to do. And the market often follows suit without a single illegal meeting. It achieves market alignment and price stability in their favor with minimal legal risk.
Which brings us to the most recent and maybe the most controversial manifestation of this whole priority shift. Micron's decision to essentially abandon the consumer market.
This is a big one.
Let's deep dive into their exit from the crucial consumer business.
This signals a fundamental permanent shift in strategy that is going to hurt consumers severely. The official statement from Micron was summarized as, they are exiting the sale of crucial consumer-branded products worldwide to improve supply and support for our larger strategic customers in faster-growing segments.
Improve supply and support for our larger strategic customers. That's corporate speak. For we are prioritizing enterprise and data centers. Full stop.
The faster-growing segment is unequivocally AI hardware. There's no other interpretation.
And this signals a total drawdown in consumer supply from one of only 3 relevant global suppliers. Crucial wasn't just another stick maker, right?
That's the key. It was the internal house brand of Micron, the silicon supplier itself. Crucial historically provided more aggressive competitive pricing because they didn't have to buy the memory from someone else. Killing that brand removes a powerful competitive first-party force from the market.
And we have to look at the prices right before this announcement because they were the canary in the coal mine. A crucial 32 GB DDR5 6000 kit. What was that selling for?
It was a consumer staple. Just a few months prior, it was selling for $85. That's just 120 days before the analysis. By the time of the announcement, it had climbed to $274.
85 to 274.
That is a staggering 222% increase in 4 months. That's an average of 1.85% per day. It's impossible to rationalize that with standard inflation or even typical cyclical demand.
No, that's purely driven by anticipation of scarcity and corporate prioritization.
And the impact on high-end users, the people who actually need high-capacity memory for their income, it's even worse. A 128 gig DDR5 kit, which you might need for professional CAD modeling, Blender, high-end video production.
That kit went from $300 to $964.
A 3.2 times increase. It fundamentally moves high-capacity RAM out of the affordability realm. For the solo professional, the hobbyist, the independent creator, it's an immediate, tangible cost barrier.
And here's where the story takes a sharp turn, connecting back to the U.S. government and taxpayer money. Micron's relationship with the government is bipartisan, spanning multiple administrations.
And they've been a major recipient of federal funds intended to boost domestic manufacturing.
This is the controversial nexus that the sources highlighted as generating significant outrage. Micron has received up to $6.4 billion in Chichki-S Act grants.
Federal funds intended to ensure a resilient domestic supply chain for critical tech. And they've gotten billions more in state and local tax breaks, up to $2 billion in New York alone.
So the controversy, as analysts put it, is that Micron is taking massive taxpayer money to build domestic fabs and R&D, but then immediately turning around and prioritizing only the mega corporate buyers, the OpenAIs, the server farm giants.
The analysts at Gamers Nexus characterize this as a perverse reverse Robin Hood cycle. The allegation is that consumers and taxpayers are essentially footing the bill to pay for their own economic destruction.
So you fund the growth of the manufacturing capacity.
Only to have that capacity immediately diverted to the largest corporations, making the resulting product-essential computing hardware unaffordable for the very people who subsidize its production through their taxes.
It's a closed loop that guarantees profits for the corporation while pushing the average buyer out of the market. And to punctuate that connection, the sources noted that Micron's CEO actually met with the Secretary of Commerce on the very same day the crucial consumer line was killed.
The timing is highly suggestive. It strongly implies the company's strategic shift is entirely aligned with, maybe even encouraged by, the government's push to establish a dominant, American AI tech stack.
The focus is on macro-industrial dominance, even if it means sacrificing the consumer base.
And of course, the only language the executives truly listen to is the stock market. Micron's stock performance confirms this decision was a massive success in their eyes.
What was the number?
The stock climbed 190% from January 1st to a recent peak.
So from their perspective, killing the lower-margin consumer segment to focus purely on the booming enterprise AI segment is a job well done.
The stock price validates the strategy, regardless of the consumer impact. This focus on shareholder value over market availability. It's the engine driving this entire crisis.
Okay, let's connect this across the hardware ecosystem. The same fabs that make DRAM also make NAND flash for SSDs. So what are the implications here? Is this crisis going to contaminate the SSD market?
The prognosis is extremely bleak. NAND flash pricing is expected to follow DRAM. It's a direct domino effect across the storage sector, and we're already seeing it.
What are the big players saying?
The CEO of Faison, Puakan Sunan, was cited warning of severe NAND shortages coming in 2026. He cited limited investment and, crucially, data center storage as the primary drivers.
And his prediction was even longer term, right?
He claims supply will be tight for the next 10 years.
10 years of tight supply. That is a long-term structural prediction, far beyond any recent cycle. What kind of NAND are we talking about here?
We're talking about TLC NAND, triple-level cell. It's the standard high-density consumer-grade flash used in nearly every affordable SSD on the market.
And we are already seeing those price increases right now.
We are. For instance, SanDisk raised its November contract prices by 50% for NAND flash. Samsung is reportedly considering 20–30% price increases for its overseas NAND supply.
What about the raw NAND price?
The sources noted that the price of 1 terabyte of TLC NAND jumped from $4.80 in July to $10.70 in November.
So it more than doubled in under 6 months.
The flash market is just mirroring the DRAM market a few months behind.
And those raw price increases are hitting consumer products now. The analysis had specific SSD examples.
It did. Crucial's T705 2TB drive skyrocketed to $265 soon after the Crucial consumer exit was announced. PNY's CS900 2TB SSD climbed 53% in just 3 months.
So this confirms the problem isn't isolated to just system RAM. This is a wholesale drain on all silicon produced by these fabs.
Whether it's volatile DRAM or non-volatile NAND storage, the market dynamics are identical. Enterprise demand is outstripping supply, leading manufacturers to prioritize high-margin contracts, whether it's for server DIMMs or massive data center SSDs.
Which means we also have to consider the ripple effect on arguably the most high-margin consumer component: GPUs, graphics cards.
The entire PC industry is feeling this. The sources mentioned rumors that NVIDIA may be delaying its unannounced Super Series refresh, possibly pushing it back.
And why is that?
It's partly due to the company prioritizing denser memory modules towards its workstation GPUs, the ones used for professional AI training and rendering, rather than the consumer gaming variants.
So it's not just a price issue, it's a supply availability issue for components that need the same dense memory that the enterprise market is willing to pay a premium for.
Precisely. And the price increases are coming. ASUS, a major board partner for both NVIDIA and AMD, has already warned it may have to increase its prices on video cards to reflect the rising cost of the RAM on those boards.
So when the base price of the silicon doubles, every product built with that silicon has to go up in price too.
Or the integrator loses their already slim consumer margins.
Okay, let's bring this all back to the person listening right now. What's the final analysis, the prognosis? Where do we go from here?
The summary is painful, but based on the data, it's straightforward. TrendForce projects a structural memory price surge for 2026 and beyond.
So this isn't getting better anytime soon.
The data strongly supports that prices will either maintain these stratospheric levels or continue to increase, driven entirely by profit prioritization and that unrelenting demand from AI servers.
We're back to that reverse Robin Hood cycle the analysis described, funded by the taxpayers who can no longer afford the products.
That's the core dynamic that defines this new market. Data centers are willing to pay exponentially more for DRAM than consumers are. Therefore, manufacturers are heavily incentivized to divert production capacity away from consumer supply,
which artificially creates a squeezed supply,
which in turn surges consumer prices even further. It's a perpetual feedback loop where the richest entities dictate the price and availability of basic computing components.
And it's so important to reiterate that this is not just about high-end desktop PCs. The source analysis points out that memory is in everything.
Consoles, laptops, phones, smartwatches, cars. The changes will be felt universally by basically anyone who buys modern electronics.
Are we seeing that impact outside the PC market already?
We are. A South Korean publication was cited noting that the memory cost for one line of Samsung phones has effectively doubled. That is a cost that will inevitably be passed on to you, the consumer, making the next generation of phones significantly more expensive.
So, what's the consumer dilemma here? The analysis said buying memory is now like trading gold with zero certainty. Is there any good advice left?
It's extremely difficult to give firm advice because we're in unprecedented territory.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't confidently predict a black swan event like the entire AI bubble collapsing.
Right.
But assuming stability and that the current trajectory holds, the data strongly supports that prices will maintain or continue to increase into 2026.
So, the old advice of just waiting for a big sale like Black Friday is essentially useless now.
Pretty much. The analysis suggests waiting for a major sale is unlikely to provide big savings. Maybe it'll bring prices down to where they were just 2 weeks prior. The sticker shock will remain.
So, what's the most viable option cited in the sources?
Buying used memory.
Used memory. Why is that considered safer or more viable than, say, a used GPU or SSD?
Well, a used SSD has a finite lifespan based on write cycles. You don't know how hard it was hammered. A GPU might have been used for around-the-clock crypto mining, severely degrading its lifespan.
Sure.
DRAM, however, is often more reliable when purchased used. Failures are less tied to heavy wear and tear in the same way. It's one of the few components where the risk of buying used is relatively low.
But the fact that buying used is now the viable option for essential components just underscores how fundamentally broken this new market is for consumers.
That's the tough note we have to end on, but it captures the current reality perfectly. To recap, we've seen prices double, driven by unprecedented AI demand. Supply cuts left manufacturers perfectly positioned to capitalize, and the resulting priority shift to servers, coupled with Micron's explicit abandonment of the consumer segment, it signals a long-term problem for the affordability of computing.
Micron's exit from Crucial is a literal manifestation of this larger trend of consolidation. They are prioritizing computing power into data centers, all under the guise of chasing the next big AI wave. So the ultimate question raised by this whole saga is, if you, the consumer, can no longer afford the hardware to run complex computations at home, if the entry price for a high-end workstation's memory has gone from $300 to nearly $1,000, what's the end game?
And this is the provocative thought for you to mull over. If essential high-capacity computing power is permanently pulled out of the hands of the consumer and centralized in massive data centers, it forces solo professionals and power users to rent.
So when Micron kills the path to affordable, high-capacity home workstations, the independent CAD user or Blender artist now has to turn to cloud computing services.
Does this mean the permanent endgame is the rental of computing power, where you pay indefinitely via subscriptions for calculations that were once handled affordably on a personal device you owned?
The era of easy, affordable home computing ownership appears to be seriously ending, replaced by a centralized subscription model dictated by the companies that control the flow of silicon.
Something to think about as you contemplate your next upgrade.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.